Good evening, Mr. Boyd-Carpenter. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for taking time to speak with us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to Azerbaijan State News Agency, Azertaj, and we highly appreciate this opportunity to discuss the cooperation between the bank and Azerbaijan, especially to talk about the work implemented by the bank in our country. How do you assess Azerbaijan's growing role as a reliable and strategically important partner for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development?
Good evening, Tamila, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be back in Baku. I hope you noticed that I brought the traditionally good English weather with me this morning. I would actually turn your question around and say, it's not Azerbaijan's job to be our partner, it's our job to be a good partner to Azerbaijan. And so what the question really is, where can we add particular value to Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan is a well-resourced country, has many strengths, it's enjoying a period of sustained economic growth, a lot of development going on. So where can a development bank like EBRD be useful? And I think for us, there's two main elements. So one is we are good at helping public and private work together. So we're a development bank that, quite unusually for development banks, works a lot for public sector, but does most of its business with the private sector. And so we're good at helping the two talk to each other, and especially good at helping governments unlock private investment and private innovation and private finance to deliver public goods. And one very good example I'd refer you to is the support we've given to the development of renewable energy in Azerbaijan. There's now over 1 gigawatt of solar and wind capacity, which is being delivered with private finance at very low cost, and we've been very proud to be supporting that. So that's one element. And then a second important area is infrastructure finance. We don't just bring money to infrastructure projects, we bring experience across 40 countries as to how to develop this, how to do it efficiently, how to do it with high standards. So I think those, as I say, I've turned the question around because it's our job to be a good partner to Azerbaijan, not the other way. And I think it's those two elements that I think where we're able to bring particular value.
What strengths would you like highlight for Azerbaijan in terms of long-term cooperation with international financial institutions?
So I think Azerbaijan has a number of strengths. One is obviously that it's a country with resource, and it's a very successful oil and gas exporter. And it's that's enabled it to grow the economy, gives it the government has a very strong fiscal position, and that gives room for Azerbaijan to then invest in new capacities, new infrastructure, improving the quality of life for its citizens. A second element is location. Azerbaijan occupies a critical location. I think maybe some of the things we'll talk about later will pick up on that theme, but has a strong positioning across an east-west corridor. And it has more than that, it has a history and a culture of being, an intermediary, a trading country. So I think that's a real strength. And then the third is just the quality of human capital. It's a country with a strong educational system, strong educational culture. We're hugely impressed with the government counterparts that we work with. So I think those are the features that make it, give it a particularly strong positioning right now in the world.
How do you assess Azerbaijan's progress in developing green energy and sustainable infrastructure?
I would say an excellent start, but a very long way to go, which is true of all countries. At least the long way to go is true. Not everybody has made an excellent start. If you think about the green transition, fundamentally, the transition that we're talking about is a transition towards an energy sector which increasingly relies on wind and sun. Now that transition is going to take decades, which for a country that is an oil and gas exporter is an important consideration. But it will come to all countries in time that the wind and sun offer an opportunity, maybe not to get all of your energy, but a lot of your energy very cheaply, very reliably, in the sense that the sun doesn't go away, the wind doesn't go away, and they're domestic, and without the environmental impacts that fossil fuels can bring. So Azerbaijan has made a good start on that with what I described about the 1 gigawatts of wind and solar. But in the long run, there's a lot more to come. And then if I look beyond energy and think about infrastructure more generally, one of the areas we're very focused on is water. And we're working now with the city of Ganja to develop the wastewater treatment facilities and the water supply facilities there. We're hoping to start doing that soon in the city of Shaki. And we're now beginning to look at helping the city of Baku think about its needs in that area. But that's a critical area where modern cities, modern countries need both to have reliable supply and reliable treatment of clean water, but also to increasingly think about the impacts of climate change.
How does the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development assess Azerbaijan's contribution to the global climate agenda?
Well, I think that the showpiece of Azerbaijan's contribution was COP30 COP29. Sorry, COP29 in Baku, which was a really successful COP. It was I think it was a COP that really showcased Azerbaijan's strengths as a sort of interlocutor between different regional groupings. COPs are fundamentally political events, and they're interesting because they combine so many dimensions. They're about politics, they're about economics, they're about morality, because climate is a moral issue in many ways. But they are ultimately political, because politics is the frame within which we bring all of those considerations to bear and try to get a resolution. And I think Azerbaijan's positioning as a country which, I shouldn't be telling you this because you know better than I do, but Azerbaijan positions itself as a country which intermediates between that is able to talk to everybody. That's really, really important when what you're trying to do is generate a consensus across 180 countries. And I think, in that respect, COP29 was a big success, and in particular, I'd highlight the agreement on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, which was very, very challenging. And I think it was a big success, probably the biggest, most important contribution to the climate agenda that Azerbaijan has made, was securing that outcome at COP.
What is Azerbaijan's role in strengthening ties between Europe and Asia through the development of transport and logistic corridors? Which of the country's infrastructure achievement do you consider the most important?
Well, the obvious answer to that is, the Southern Gas Corridor and the BTC pipeline. I actually worked on both of those projects earlier in my career, and so I'm well aware just how complex and difficult at the time, and particularly the BTC pipeline, which really was at the time. Now it seems like a fact of life, but at the time it really was not obvious that a pipeline like that, of that length, of that technical complexity, through 3 countries, could be built. Azerbaijan became then a very reliable supplier of oil and then subsequently gas to the global markets. And I think that is clearly its headline achievement in terms of acting as a logistics hub and so on. Beyond that, there's a lot more to come, right? What we're seeing in the world now is an increasing, a much stronger awareness of the vulnerability of supply chains. If you've been asking me this question in January, I would have said, well, theoretically, supply chains are vulnerable. But right now, with the Straits of Hormuz, currently in this very difficult situation, we're all acutely aware. And frankly, the weeks and months to come, this may play out in even more challenging ways. And so the importance of diversification of supply chains. And then, what are Azerbaijan's strengths? Well, there's 2, right? One is location. You can be the most committed, most richest country in the world, but if you're at the end of a supply chain, you've not got much to contribute. Whereas if you are in a critical location between, the great manufacturing powerhouse in the east and big consumer hubs in the west, and obviously trade flows both ways and so on. But if you're in that location, then that gives you an important role to play. But then the other thing is just experience. The country knows how to craft the political consensus and knows how to build things. So I think those 2, the location and then the demonstrated capacity to exploit that location are valuable.
What are the country's most important achievements in economic diversification? Which sectors of the Azerbaijan economy currently demonstrate the greatest development potential?
Well, being frank, this is a big challenge, right? As I said, for us, we do have a deep institutional conviction that in time, global consumption of fossil fuels will fall. It's not going to happen overnight. And many countries, including the Western countries that Azerbaijan currently supplies, are currently very large consumers of fossil fuels and will remain so for years to come. But our conviction is that there are very powerful economic reasons why over time people will shift away from fossil fuels towards electrification, to electric cars, to electric ways of heating your home, electric ways of generating heat for industry. And in the longer term, using electricity to make some of the liquid fuels that we currently get from fossil fuels. So, and you can see Azerbaijan itself, as I said, embracing that transition. So we're not talking about overnight, but diversification is perhaps the biggest strategic priority for the country. One success is the launch of renewable energy in this country, which in turn, Azerbaijan has very good renewable resources, very good solar, good wind, potentially very good offshore wind. That gives you the potential to be a good green manufacturer based on green energy. I think a couple of other areas that we're aware of, tourism. It's a beautiful country. You don't need me to tell you that, but it is. It's a beautiful country, it's a beautiful coastline, there's lots of historical interest, it's situated in a fascinating part of the world. And so I think it has real potential there. And agriculture. We've supported the agriculture sector to some extent. There's potential there. And then I think the combination of a lot of capital, a lot of finance available, a lot of money available, and the high quality of human capital, things like high-tech manufacturing, data centers, there's real opportunities there. But I will, agree with where I think your question started, which is diversification is very, very important.
How do you see Azerbaijan's role in the regional and global economy over the next 10-15 years? Can the country become a model for successfully combining its energy heritage with green transformation?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I certainly hope that EBRD can play a part in that. I think the challenge will be what your last question just evoked, which is, for the next, I think the time frame you talked about was 10-15 years. There's no question that Azerbaijan will remain a critical fossil fuel exporter, and it has a reputation for reliability. And in the past maybe we took that for granted. Well, we don't anymore after what's happened in the last few months. So I think that will be a very important part of its economic model for the next 10 to 15 years. But indeed, can it? Yes, it can become a model for transformation. It can become a model for developing its own infrastructure to a high quality, becoming an exporter potentially, or if not an exporter, a transit country of green energy and derivatives of green energy like green ammonia and green hydrogen. But then the real question mark remains the one you asked before, which is how to diversify into those other sectors. Has the resources to do that? And it's proved it can develop one industry from scratch. When, as I said, in the early 2000s, Azerbaijan as a gas exporter, as a pipeline transit country, a pipeline exporting country, seemed very, very hard to achieve, but it managed it. So it managed to build a new industry from scratch once. It can do it again. And certainly from the EBRD perspective, that's our number one mission in this country, to support that transformation.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your views with us.